I'm going to begin with you, Anthony. Just wondering how you came to be involved in this project and what compelled you to tell this story.
So I was developing some ideas with the writer Helen Kingston, and she had read about this terrible tragedy which happened, where a shipping container full of refugees was delivered at the docks, and some of them had died, and they were banging on the side to try and get people's attention. When they opened it up, there was like this whole family of people in there, and she said, "Oh, that would probably make a really interesting stage play because it's contained, literally like a stage." And I said, "Oh, that's not a stage play. That's an independent film." And then as we developed it, it became bigger. We involved a lorry park and then the jungle, and then eventually we were just like, well, we might as well tell the whole story, and that's how it came about.
Because it says based on sort of multiple true stories. I was wondering to what degree did you have a sort of collection of interviews with refugees?
Yeah, so we went to Calais and we worked in the jungle, helped build shelters and things, and we just talked to loads and loads and loads of people and heard everyone's different stories. And it's very difficult to sort of choose one story when there are so many from so many different places in the world. And what we sort of focused on was the story of someone from Eritrea, because at the time the Syrian conflict was in full swing, and that was kind of in the media, and I wanted to sort of avoid that because it was the more socially acceptable sort of refugee, and I wanted to pick a country which people didn't really understand the human rights issues, so it became Eritrea.
It must have been quite an upsetting research process for both of you in this instance.
And shooting process.
Yeah.
I mean, physically and emotionally taxing. It took a while to shed that one. It's quite, I was saying just before, I mean, quite often there were moments where all of the artifice dropped and you were sitting in holding onto the undercarriage of a lorry for 5 seconds, let alone however distance. Some people are risking their lives to get to Calais and London. And also, I think the film not only shows the struggles and the challenges of these epic nomadic journeys some of these people have taken, but also the effect and the taxing effect on the other little people, the lorry drivers, the immigration officers, the policemen having to ignore the humanity there but still fill these quotas and do these jobs.
Yeah, because we tried to film on a ferry and they politely declined and said, actually this affects our business and costs us hundreds of thousands of pounds a year. So it is a really complicated subject matter which does affect lots of people in different ways. It's not a black and white situation.
Because one of the things it sort of did for me when I left was it puts, when you see a movie like this and it sort of shines a light on the sort of refugee crisis in the world, it puts a lot of stuff into perspective. So things that we might get bogged down by in everyday life, sort of work and kind of sort of these sort of quite these things that are quite trivial, I suppose, in real life, and you realise what people in the world are sort of going through. Was that something that happened in the film, in the sense that when you're making a movie, obviously it's quite a tough thing, and I've been on film sets, and lots of people are running around looking very stressed and looking a bit. When you're working with a film with this subject, did it put things into perspective for you guys? Did it make you sort of feel like we're just making a movie here? When you're dealing with characters that have had to go through things like this.
No, I'd say, being in the same environments was really, really harrowing at points. Like you said, hanging onto the lorry and being out at sea on the boat. You really got to feel for the emptiness and how dangerous it was for these people to make these journeys.
I remember upon arriving in Calais to shoot, the latter part of the film, just that utter, guilt of my own privilege, the fact that we're here shooting this thing and people are still waiting for this. We may be shedding a light on these stories and these struggles, but actually this is still going on. I remember breaking down on Luke's shoulder and it just getting a little bit too much, but it meant that it brought the best out of almost everyone that was involved in it. It was because it had to be told, and I think there was an energy there and that dutiful, but not exploitative.
And that's exactly it. It's a story that needs to be told, and as a director, that was very important motivation for me, to do these people justice and to actually portray them in a realistic and an accurate light.
And it's my be a sort of tough question to answer. But where do you think this lack of compassion and empathy is coming from in the modern world at the moment? I mean, obviously, it's in part the refugee crisis, which has led into Brexit and Trump and stuff like that. And obviously, for people like-minded people like ourselves, we just can't understand these people are fleeing. These people are fleeing their houses they're not doing it because they want to. They're doing it because they have to. And for some reason, society is just rejecting them.
I think some media outlets and some politicians make that easy in this sort of fear culture and hysteria. Yeah. As soon as we start using collective nouns like the flood itself or swarms of immigrants, then quite easily we can start to desensitize ourselves and not see the humanity in the situation. It becomes a problem. And I think it's more so a humanitarian crisis than it is a refugee crisis. And I think hopefully this film can open up the floor for a conversation to be had about what's going wrong at the source, as opposed to why are these people washing up on our shores. More so, what are they running from? And what can we do to try and I think in doing so we'd loosen up some resources on our side and save a lot of the tragedy and depravity we see, and this film doesn't shy away from.
I agree, and the channel also buys us a lot of ignorance. Mainland Europe, and Turkey especially, has taken so many more refugees in than we can even comprehend. So they're really at the forefront, and little Fortress England, we've got our little channel of ignorance, really.
You must be hoping that this film reaches people, though, of the mindset, to try and show this film is just so rich in humanity. I mean, you must be hoping in some ways this film reaches, the people that don't see the things that we do.
Well, that was the idea of Lena's character, Wendy, is, she's a Daily Mail reading Brexiteer, who's works as an immigration officer rejecting people, and she's the best at her job, and that's why she's brought in for this case. And we just wanted to, again, just put two human beings in one room and let them communicate. And Haile's character gets through to her, although he starts on with 1 foot back, because he's obviously been caught with a knife from the lorry. He still manages, through his own charm and experiences and his journey, to melt her heart. And I think that's, if we can do that to the audience, then we've won.
So what was she like to work with? I mean, obviously you share so many scenes with her in quite sort of an intimate setting. I mean, what was that like to collaborate with Lena in this instance?
Fantastic, and to see artists of her caliber working on such passion projects, it's not a must, she doesn't have to. And so seeing that she has the attention and the time to do that, I think kind of opens up the floor to like, why don't more? Why don't we do more? Why can't we do more? And she's fantastic, she's generous, lovely, and is very active in many a charity organisation, and has been really supportive.
I was wondering, because I just wondering if you were a Game of Thrones fan, because obviously in some scenes just sit there with Lena and Iain, and they're two big players in the Game of Thrones world. Did you ever just, when you first started, just think, that's pretty cool? Yeah,
completely. And I was in the middle of, I think then was maybe season 5, so that was a very disorientating thing. And I think just recently just been announced in Game of Thrones prequel, so I think we've almost got a bit of a Game of Thrones lineup here.
Yeah, that was my segue to ask about the prequel. Are you allowed to tell me who you're playing or anything yet about it, or no?
It was a great experience working with them both, and then we've started filming, and it's set about millennia before what we know as Game of Thrones. It's not completely different, but George R. Martin's still attached, and it's hopefully going to be a fantastic story there.
I'm available to direct an episode.
My final question was, have you got anything in the pipeline? Have you got any other projects?
So I mean, I'm developing a TV show at the moment, which is about the Battle of Malta during World War II, which is just this incredible siege, really, which happened over 4 years. Like more bombs dropped on Malta than any other country in World War II put together. Like, it's incredible what those guys went through and how they came out successful at the end of it.
I'm available if you need that.
Yeah, of course.
Cheers, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Ladies and gentlemen, you're watching Hey You Guys!
Hey You Guys, huh?
Hey, you guys.
Is that from the Goonies?
It is indeed, yeah.
Nice.
Hey!